Commissioners, are any corrections or additions to those minutes? If not, do we have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Commissioner Martin. How about a second?
Second?
Got a second? We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. We have several public hearings this meeting, so we'll start with the first one, the deals with wheels, rezoning. Staff report by Justin.
Commissioners, the applicant requesting to rezone this property from C3, Community Regional Commerce, to C4, Highway Auto Specialized Commerce, and asking for a special use permit for automotive sales. This half-acre parcel was the former Auto Stop gas station and convenience store. It closed several years ago. The site has been for sale for some time. Staff was informed that there's several use restrictions recorded against the property, limiting it from being used for several different uses. The applicants operate a used car dealership in Inver Grove Heights called Deals with Wheels. They would like to open a satellite store in Hastings to serve a wider area. No vehicle service is being proposed. The site improvements would include remodeling of the building, parking lot restriping, and a new sign. This is an aerial photograph showing the location of the property, and I've got a couple of photographs also of the property from a couple different angles. It's located kind of between Las Margaritas and Domino's Pizza. The property is currently zoned C3, which allows retail and retail services, office, residential above the first floor, lodging, entertainment, amusement clubs, parking lots, all by right. It also allows auto repair, car washes, animal clinics, towers, and brew pubs by special use permit, but it does not allow auto sales. Auto sales are only allowed in the C2 district. The C2 district also allows restaurants, gas stations, auto repair, car wash, motel, and similar. This is a zoning map of the area. The property is kind of in the center, circled, highlighted in blue. It's 2128 on the corner. All the properties in red are zoned C3, and C2 is shown in kind of a pink color a little further down. There's also industrial to the east and residential to the west. This is a zoning map blown up a little bit more, showing the other C2 properties further down, and C4 district much further down, which is. If the site is approved for auto sales through a special use permit, it would only be in the report and on the application, and it would become null and void after 1 year failure to begin or 3 years after inactivity. Also, it could run perpetually on the land as long as its operation does not change in scope or scale with what was proposed. This is a rendering of the site after the improvements would be made from the applicant. The southern Vermillion Street corridor has a mix of C3, C2, and C4 zoning, which all have very similar intensity allowed. They all allow retail commerce and include uses with a similar impact to traffic, noise, hours of operation. Because of the similarities, the individual parcels could be rezoned and still would not be considered spot zoning based on Minnesota case law and Minnesota the League of Minnesota Cities best practices for rezoning. All of the surrounding uses that are currently around the property in zone C3 would also be allowed if they were zoned C2. There's only 8 parcels in the city of Hastings that are zoned C2, and they've already been developed. And one more slide just showing, this is a more accurate description of what they're proposing to do for the parking lot spaces. They're required to have 6 spaces for employees and customers, and those are proposed along the front of the building, and then display of vehicles along the outer edge of the property. Notice was published in the paper and sent to property owners within 350 feet of the property. Staff finds no issues with rezoning the property with the conditions listed in the staff report. And with that, the commission can hold a public hearing, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Justin. Well, we'll open the public hearing. If anybody would like to come up and talk, please come up to the podium and give your name and address.
Is it okay if I hand you guys one of these?
Sure. Oops, got it all apart too.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Balsamo, and I am the wife of Douglas Balsamo, sister-in-law of Matt Balsamo, and they are the current owner, from Deals with Wheels of the Emerald Grove Heights location. The packets that we handed out with you, I would like to just kind of read and go over with you about what we are, what our mission and our values are as a business, and the community that we serve, the improvements that we have already done in our local location now. So our core value and mission is helping to service our customers' drive-in needs while being a mark and betterment of our community. We pride ourselves in selling reliable, good quality vehicles. And what we do, we not only specialize in all financing options, whether it's from poor credit to outstanding credit and everything in between. We have proven to be the community's leading experts on providing challenging credit ratings, turning them from a no to a yes in financing. Giving our customers real-world tools to be upholding, contributing citizens. With over 20 great relationships we have with local and non-local credit unions, we were able to provide a solution for our customers and their driving needs. Our number one goal for our customers is outstanding customer satisfaction by providing the customers with a non-pressure, comfortable sales approach and making sure all our vehicles are pre-inspected by our certified mechanics. Our history. Since 2011, we have made our positive mark in the community that we have served, allowing us to be successful in growth for our business and the community. Since opening our doors in the city of Apple Valley, Minnesota, we were able to go from leasing to fully purchasing our current location, which is located in Emerald Grove Heights, Minnesota. Our growth continues to strive. This is due to the success and knowledge our team continues to deliver within the industry. Acknowledging that the route to success does not come unless our community is prospering first. Since March of 2016, we have grown over $3.6 million in gross revenue per year. With a total of 7 employees, we total $354,438.30 with taxable wages paid. This has all been achievable by continuing to servicing our customers and community with integrity and a head-to-heart eagerness. The community we serve now, we are actively involved with sponsoring and donating to multiple local community organizations. Youth, sports, the VFW, Lions Club, Minnesota Amber Alert, just to name a few. Deals with Wheels knows and understands without the support of a healthy, growing community, our cause and mission cease to exist. Deals with Wheels would be honored and also contributing our positive, reputable contribution to the city of Hastings, Minnesota. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Monty Knoll, and I own the business across the street at 2127 Vermillion Street. And about a year ago, I asked Mr. Hinsman about selling cars on my property, and he said it'll never happen. Just wondering what the difference is with this property and my property. If you could tell.
Sure, I can address that. Situation would be similar on that. Application would need to be made, and then rezoning would need to take place.
Okay. So, well, basically what you told me was don't even try because it's never going to happen, and that's were your exact words. I just wondered what the difference is between you know. So I'd have to do the same thing, go through the same special use permit.
Correct.
So this is not a rezone for good, it's just a special use.
Actually, it's both on that one. It would be a rezoning of the property to allow for the use,
Okay,
and then a special use permit within that zoning district to allow for the auto sales.
I see. Okay. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to bring up?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Ian.
It's more of a question geared toward you guys, John and Justin. With only 8 C2 parcels in the city and such a large amount of similarities between the two, why have 2 different C2 and C3 if they seem so similar?
Well, the C3 district, there is a lot of it in this area, but there's also a lot of it closer to downtown. And actually, the downtown is also Zone C3. With that difference, you know, we may not want to have auto sales and auto repair without even needing a special use permit in some of those areas. As far as intensity goes, they are pretty similar, but I think just the fact that there's so much difference in a lot of the areas that are zoned C3 currently, I don't know if we'd want them mixed. I think our long-term plan might be to rezone some of those C3 areas to like a downtown core, and then maybe even some areas, you know, something else, like a C1 or something like that.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Barth.
Justin, are there any exterior enhancements, hard to tell from the rendering, planned on the project, or any required for a permit to bring them up to standards for building finishes or anything like that?
There may be some. They'd have to work with the building safety department and the fire marshal. There might be some requirements, but there's not anything that the planning department would have for a requirement.
Okay. And then a second question for you, as far as the C2 existing properties, you said all 8 were developed, so is on the east side of Vermillion at 25th, that empty lot in front of the hotel, is that C2? Or is that C3?
Yeah, that is C2.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not really developed. There's been really nothing that's ever been proposed on that anytime in the recent past. It's kind of been a difficult one to deal with.
Right. Okay, appreciate that, thank you.
Justin, you said that the auto sales, the cars for sale are gonna be parked on the side of the lot there? Is there 6 spots? Is that all that's going to be available?
Well, they've identified 6 spots for customers, and the other spots that are shown on the site, they're intending to have vehicles for sale. The zoning ordinance requires a number of spots for the size of the building, which is 6 in this case.
Okay, so 6 for staff and 6 for customers, and the rest would be for vehicles.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Chair.
Yes.
I was just trying to, and I tried to locate it before I came here too, but I was looking online, and it's a huge document, but the Vermillion Street corridor study. And I have in my mind visions of what the theory was there with ultimately these buildings out maybe towards the road front and parking in the back, and, you know, this whole concept. is this contrary to that? I mean, how much do we want to be looking or leaning on this corridor study? Is this something that we should be thinking about as we move forward? Is this in line with that study or not in line with that study?
Well, first of all, this is not a total site redevelopment, it's just a reuse of an existing building, so our ability to require it to be changed is limited. The plan that calls for buildings to be closer to the street and parking in the rear is for situations where that's been the development pattern of the adjoining properties. Like further up on Vermillion Street, where you do find a lot of the sites have been developed that fashion.
North of this, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But it is something we consider when we look at redevelopments, for sure.
Commissioners, any other questions? If not, we can take a motion. We can either do the zoning and the special use separately or together, as a motion together.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for approving the rezoning SUP number 2019-11 as submitted by by the staff here.
We have a motion on the table. Anybody second it?
Second.
We have a second. Commissioners, any other comments? If not, we'll take a vote. All those to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Those disapproved, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries.
And the city council will review this at their May 20th meeting for a final determination.
Thank you. We have another public hearing on the City of Hastings Ordinance Amendment for the keeping of chickens in residential area. Staff report by Justin.
Thank you very much. The keeping of chickens is being brought up once again. It was last brought up a decade ago in 2009, originally at the request of the the Dakota County Historical Society, who wanted to have chickens at the Leduc Estate. They're zoned public institutional. When it came to the Planning Commission meeting for consideration, a lot of residents came to that meeting and said that they were interested in it being expanded to the residential areas also. And so the Planning Commission tabled it and directed staff to include that in the proposal. And so we brought that forward, and the Planning Commission recommended approval of that, and the City Council denied the residential zoning aspect, but did approve the public institutional zoning. So we do have a chicken ordinance, and we're proposing to include residential zoning back in with that, with a couple of minor changes to the ordinance to make that work. And this was at the request of citizens once again. And the City Council Planning Committee looked at the requests and directed staff to bring it through the Planning Commission and Council for comments. Staff, I should also mention, does receive a few inquiries per year from city residents asking if we allow residential chickens in town. We also get the request from prospective residents looking at moving to Hastings. Some large cities in the nation that allowed residential chickens in 2009 are shown on the screen. There was quite a few, but since that time, it's grown quite a bit. This is a list of just the states A through F, 60 of them, and there's well over 175 major cities in the nation that allow residential chickens in their cities. In 2009, this is a list of the cities that we found that allowed chickens in residential areas. And since that time, it's quadrupled. Just to name some that are in Dakota County would be Burnsville, Farmington, Inver Grove Heights, Mendota Heights, Eagan, West St. Paul, South St. Paul, Rosemount, and Lakeville is currently reviewing a proposal to do just that. And then along with the other cities that are on the screen. The general ordinance requirements that we have for Hastings currently and would be that no roosters are permitted, no more than 4 chickens for a residential lot. Any lot that's larger than an acre could have an additional 4 per acre. And that's not very common that anyone would have a parcel that size other than the Leduc estate, possibly a school or the hospital. And the license is granted by the city council after a neighborhood notification. We were looking at notifying a radius of 200 feet. Previously in the ordinance, it was 350 feet. A council member thought that was a bit too far. 350 feet is what's required when we make a land use change by state statute. But it can be quite a distance away from a property. For variances, we do only notify the neighboring property owners. The first year that a chicken license is approved, it's probationary, and it would be renewed every 5 years. And the license can be revoked for unresolved nuisances. There's some requirements for a license holder, including the confinement area. It would have to be a fenced area. There would need to be a enclosure that complies with the building regulations for accessory structures. And it would have to be completely covered and secured with a solid floor. It would have to be set back 25 feet from neighboring homes. We've also added a notice in the ordinance that homeowners associations may not permit chickens or some of the required improvements that are required by ordinance, including fencing and accessory buildings, which would preclude them from obtaining a license. We also reiterated the language that's in our animal ordinance relating to animal welfare, talking about the treatment of animals and not allowing for butchering or killing or otherwise being inhumane to animals, including chickens. Zoning districts that would allow the chickens, in addition to what is currently allowed of public institutional, would be the R1, low-density residence. Anything that's added to that zoning district automatically trickles down to R1L and R2. Also, we'd be adding R3, medium-density residence. Those are the main residential districts in the city. It wouldn't apply to mobile home zoning or high-density residential. We reached out to other cities that allow chicken ordinances and to kind of see what their experience has been with them and any comments they would have to a city that was looking at making this change in their city. Several that I talked to said that over the years since 2009, since we last talked to them, they've amended their ordinance a little bit to relax some of the requirements. Some of them originally had yearly renewals and a high percentage of neighbor approval required. And they said that they changed it because the yearly renewal they didn't feel was beneficial. There was never any reason to do a yearly renewal. Nothing ever had changed. They said it works well just doing the original review, and then if you don't get any complaints, there generally isn't any kind of issues. Also, not a lot of cities have neighbor approval. Some had required as high as 80% of your neighbors have to approve of it. And they said that's difficult to get, especially when a lot of people just aren't interested in responding. And generally, the council and the ordinance would put in place something they felt is something reasonable for somebody to do, and they don't want somebody being punished because they don't get along with their neighbors. I asked the cities if they have had any neighborhood complaints from issues from the chickens, from noise or smells or anything of that nature, and they said they had not received any complaints. And I asked them how many licenses they've had in their cities, and they said between 3 and 15 license holders, with the majority kind of being in between there, between 8 and 15, I'd say, was the most common. As far as public health, health risks, the Dakota County Public Health Department said there's no concern for public health from backyard chickens, and the numbers proposed of 4. They said they would just recommend that owners maintain the same hand washing practice that they should for having any pet. And that is all. I just want to point out there is one error in the proposed ordinance amendment where it says that 4 chickens are allowed per acre. That should be amended. That's the original ordinance. What's proposed would be 4 chickens allowed per parcel, with an additional 4 per acre above that for large properties. And again, this is a public hearing, and staff can answer any questions.
Thank you, Justin. We'll open the public hearing. If anybody would like to come up and speak, please come up to the podium and give your name and address.
Good evening. Thank you to the commission members for allowing me to speak on this important topic. My name is Brian Jones. I live at 1573 Stonegate Road in Hastings. I have some personal experience with this issue, since I was not only present but argued against this almost exact proposal 10 years ago when it was before the Hastings City Council. At that time, the council overwhelmingly voted against it for several reasons that were discussed. And I'd like to just talk about a few of them. The memorandum that all of you received is obviously very well written and accurate, but to be honest, I think it's not very objective. It presents one side of the issue. Obviously, nothing is that clear cut, and so there are several things to consider with these ordinances. First and most importantly, one only needs to spend a few minutes on the internet to find out that this has been a controversial topic across the country, as there are issues. And I think the most important thing is they talk about the backyard farmer and some of the issues regarding the keeping of chickens. Some of those are the maintenance. What is it to be healthy for chickens? They can get lice, mites, worms. There's regular care and cleaning, disposal of manure. A lot of people raise chickens inside their house to start with, and then they bring them outside. How do you keep rodents away? And if not done well, there is a risk of not only the animals suffering, but there is a chance of human disease. In fact, in 2016, the CDC, Centers for Disease and Control, dealt with the largest number of illnesses from backyard poultry, 8 outbreaks of human salmonella, which was 895 people in 48 states. So it does happen. For the backyard farmer, there's also the issue of cost. They start enchanted with the idea of free eggs, but then finding issues with the cost of a coop, vet, care, hours, maintenance, etc., results in abandoning chickens. It starts like a pet, and before you know it, they don't know what to do with it. In Minneapolis, according to the Associated Press, in 2001, when Minneapolis started this, they have a nonprofit called Chicken Run Rescue, which sounds funny. It's a nonprofit for helping abandon domestic fowl. In 2001, they fielded 6 calls from individuals looking to find homes for chickens that they no longer wanted. By 2012, which as you know is quite some time from now, that same organization reached almost 500 calls. So in the city of Minneapolis, people start keeping chickens as pets, or they're raising them, and pretty soon they don't want them anymore and they don't know what to do with them. Another reason is backyard chickens are, of course, especially vulnerable to predators from dogs, coyotes, foxes, owls. Third, what about other animal requests? So a lot of the communities have dealt with this. They start with chickens, and then somebody says, well, if we have chickens, can we have goats? Can we have small little pigs? Once you open the door, I think you also have to accept the fact that you have to deal with that. Fourth, and to be honest, when people move into the city, I think you have a reasonable expectation that you're not going to be living next door to chickens. And I don't think providing notice to homeowners change that. Hastings is surrounded by ample farmland, and if people want to raise chickens, that's exactly why there's farm and agricultural communities. Fifth, with any type of an ordinance, there is going to be code enforcement issues. It's not that plain and simple that no one is going to not complain. And it is going to surface, and if you look at the regulation section of the proposed ordinance, it deals with noise issues, odor, sanitary conditions, annoyance to others, and those are all very subjective things. So what's noisy or smells bad or annoys somebody is subjective. The city council, city staff, or city attorney is going to have to deal with complaints. And lastly, this is really, I think, a minority issue. There's 853 cities in the state of Minnesota, and there's 39 listed in the memo. That means there's a lot of cities that don't allow chickens. Locally, there's 20,000 people in the city of Hastings. I think getting 1 to 3 calls per year or of somebody asking for this, I can assure you that if we were to take a poll of the citizens in the city of Hastings, I think the vast majority are not looking forward to this. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, I had mentioned to some people about this proposal, and everyone's like, well, I don't want chickens living next to me. They're not going to allow that, are they? That's craziness. And then I guess I would just say in summary, the question isn't whether you can allow this. I think it's a question of whether you should. I just think there's more pressing issues to deal with for everyone. And I hope you'll vote against the proposal. Thanks.
Anyone else like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Hi, thank you, commissioners, for taking this change under serious consideration. My name is Barbara Walther. I live at 1880 Steeple Lane, and I work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm a senior ecologist with the regulatory branch. I have a significant background in biology. I have a significant background in regulations, so I'm very familiar with kind of all of the issues that you need to consider. I want to thank you, Justin, for a very reasoned, I thought, approach to your report by asking other cities that have done this. The city has been asked to consider this ordinance again, and you went about asking other cities that have this ordinance have there been problems. I'd like to counter just a few of the comments because I think it's very important to me that we allow chickens in the city. So I'm here in support of that. That there may be 1, 2, 3 people asking about it. I see that as one of the answers to if there's a number of chickens needing rescue, then we need more people that are able to keep chickens to allow those chickens to be rescued. I would love to be one of those people who could rescue those chickens that need a place to live. So that would just be one reason right there. I would be one of those 1 to 3 people. I know that the internet has a lot of information, and a lot of the information has shown that all of the issues that are controversial have been disproven. And by the fact that the the public health risks, the Dakota County Public of Health really does indicate this. I mean, the studies and the research bears the information out that they're pets. And we treat them as pets when we care for them. So the issues of all this that are here, if it comes to a level of nuisance, as I saw kind of the proposed language, I thought was handled appropriately for a residential area. So again, thank you, Justin, for that, getting the feedback. I feel very seriously that that was very good public service. I'm a public servant. I appreciate that. So thanks for taking that approach to the report. I find that there is no surprise to me that there are no issues in the cities. Keeping chickens in Minneapolis, I have friends who do keep chickens. I would like to keep the 3 or 4 that are proposed, for example. Minneapolis allows up to 30. Minneapolis does not have a problem with the chickens. If they do, they deal with it because they have fines. I don't want 30 chickens, and they have even their fines are set up so it's 1 to 6, 6 to 15, I think, and then 15 to 30, and you just pay your fee based on how many chickens you want to keep. They do keep roosters. I don't want to keep roosters. Okay, so Minneapolis is a totally different city. I get it, but just consider that. I mean, it's a far more populous city than ours. Hastings, I have seen, is the rural, I mean, it's people come to Hastings for the rural atmosphere. I live on the edge of town near Ninninger. I live next to a farm. I kind of do expect to live next to chickens. I hear them. So I'm just saying, Hastings, I mean, my kids, we joke and call Hastings Haystack. I mean, it's a farm community, and I say that lovingly. I mean, I love Hastings, so I thank you again. Last year, I even looked into raising chickens because I'm raising my, I have a 2-year-old grandson. I want to teach him how to raise and be taking care of chickens. So looked in so far as the kind of varieties we were going to have. I knew it was 3 or 4, I think I had heard that Hastings had. But before we bought the housing, because you always start with housing first, being a good citizen, I double-checked the ordinance and saw that I can't where I live. So I'm one of those people asking you to reconsider it, please, based on the updated information, what we've learned in the 10 years since we've been out here. So again, I'm glad to hear the update is being considered very reasonably, and I support the change to allow chickens in all residential areas. I think I had one question here, and I think you showing the way the language you described it tonight is, I think, very appropriate. I think the fees seem reasonable, I'll say that, but I do think the city should consider offering a waiver for those who may need assistance, for those who aren't able to afford but would like to have the chickens. I would just offer that to consider as well. Thank you for considering me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to step up? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions?
I have a question for Justin. Justin, when you ask the cities about their ordinances, I'm just curious, the 25 feet from any neighbors, I think is too, I don't know that a lot of lots would even accommodate that with, garage and the building itself to even be able to be 25 feet away from lot lines. Just because of the smaller lots in the city itself, there's only so large a lots in the city. So I feel like that could eliminate many, many lots in the city that would probably be ones that would be wanting to supplement food. I think something that's missed in what I've heard so far is that we need food in our area. I talked to Hastings Family Service. I talked to Sparrow Food Co-op, and there's clearly a need, and there's kids and families in town that don't have enough food, and with eggs being so nutritional, complete protein, I think that realizing those types of needs in a rural city where we don't have a lot of competition, we're kind of stuck with the prices that we have because we are set out from the bigger city and the lower prices and competition. I think our people suffer more than closer to the city. And I think that's been proven with Hastings Family Service and with the Sparrow Food Co-op, is that, you know, because we don't have transportation in the city, that people can get to grocery stores. I mean, there's many dynamics that this being a smaller town brings that doesn't exist as predominantly in these bigger cities. I feel like the food supply at a reasonable cost. And I also know people that raise chickens for eggs, that give away eggs because they need to, because they don't have, you know, they don't have enough people that want them. So it's like, that's a great thing for our town, just for our communities to be sharing food with each other. But I think probably what I would like to have addressed is not to have a footage from a neighbor, and just have building setbacks, because the requirement for there being a coop and what it be made of, and it, you know, the construction of it is going to contain enough to be next to a property line, but within the setback of any other building.
That setback is from the neighbor's building, the neighbor's house. So the closest, any accessory building could be from somebody else's house with general setbacks would be 5 feet for the accessory building, and then the neighboring house, the closest they can be in like the R2 district would be 7 feet. So right there, you know, you're gonna be close to the 25 feet anyway. That was
So
just
each lot has a 5-foot setback for a building.
for an accessory building. It's even-
Accessory building,
The
okay.
house should actually be back even further. It should be 7 or 10.
Right, but that does not happen in the city proper. You know what I mean? Those houses are on lot lines, they're over lot lines, they're over, you know, we got small lots within the core city, you know, the original.
Sure. Well, that was just a common one that was found. Some varied, some don't have any, some cities don't have any ordinance whatsoever. So there's room for amendments.
Sure.
There's no magic with that 25 feet.
Okay. Yeah, I just want everybody to be able to if they want to, you know.
Justin, do we have a good idea of why the council turned it down last time? What their reasoning was?
At that time, they made, you know, several comments. I remember that one person said, I just don't want to look out my window and see a bunch of chicken coops. I can't remember every reason they had. There wasn't one specific reason that they all shared. I don't know that they all even shared their personal reasoning.
I mean, it's a situation where you've heard both sides tonight. You have people that are in support of it, you have people that have concerns with it, and we found that in 2009 as well. You know, arguments on both sides of it. I think at the council meeting at that time, I think it was split 50-50 between for and against comments at that time. So we understand that there are two sides to this issue, but we do continue to get to requests to hold chickens, and looking at other cities that are out there and the number of cities that have allowed these, and the limited problems that we've been able to establish in those cities is the reason we're right back before you tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Clarification, so the typo was 4 chickens per parcel, and then the second half of that was 4 more per acre?
Well, I think the way it's written is how the code is now, which is written specifically for public institutional zoning. I just had failed to make the change for what's being proposed now, which would be 4 per parcel and an additional 4 per acre above that.
So if you had an acre, you could have 8 right off the bat.
I'm sorry?
If you had an acre, you could have 8 chickens from the get-go.
I guess it would be up to you. I mean, I didn't come up with anything. I was thinking probably it would be 4 as a minimum, and
Yep.
then every acre over 1 probably would be
Over one,
another 4.
yeah. Maybe that should be clearer there. And then covered enclosures, coops, must be provided. Is there a specification on coop sizing, square feet per chicken? You know, I mean, so where does that go?
We don't have anything in the proposed ordinance for that. That's, in looking at what other cities had, there's a small percentage of cities that got into a lot of formulas for things. And we just didn't feel it was necessary to go that far. But it's something that could be added.
Yeah, and again, my concern would be, you know, they have 4 chickens in a little box, and it's a tough life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it might make sense to somehow spec that out. I know we're making a mountain out of a molehill here, but I think we have to be careful with that. And then lastly, I know that the commenter commented on the fees. They struck me as almost like high. I think this should be more accessible. And you know, your argument too is like, can there be a concession for people that can't afford that kind of thing? I don't know. It just struck me as we could reinvent those fees.
Minneapolis fees, by the way, are lower.
That's, thank you. Go for it.
I don't know that we had anything proposed yet for the renewal. Generally, right now, the fee is $100, and I think we may have charged that for the renewals, for the one that we have, but some of our other renewals for like home occupation is $100 for the original application, and then renewal is $50. That probably would be in line with that. It generally does not take much staff time for renewals compared to the original proposal.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, if you're gonna try and profit from some eggs, how long is it gonna take you to catch up if you gotta pay $100 out the get-go? For a lot of
Well,
eggs.
No, I understand. We also do want to make sure that applicants are paying the burden of the request.
Understood.
And especially the way it was written with the notice of 350 people, just the postage alone, you know, is halfway there. You know, now that we're, you know, looking at 200 feet, you know, that would be less. That would go into the calculation to determine the
Right,
cost.
right. No, thank you.
Mr. Chair. Justin, so on that note, with the notification, what parameters, what threshold are we gonna use if people speak for or against?
Well, we don't have anything for thresholds for any of our ordinances, any of our requests that we notify people for. But what we'd like to hear from neighbors is either general support or maybe nothing. If neighbors come in and say, this guy has got problems taking care of the dogs or the cats that he has, or he doesn't, they don't keep up their property, or they have a lot of, you know, issues with property maintenance, that's definitely something that the commissions and city council would consider when they're trying to do something else on their property. And that has been what's led to some denials of home occupations in the past, is complaints from neighbors of the applicant having a hard time following all their ordinances.
And then the other one, 4 chickens, where was that number derived from?
That is just probably one of the most common numbers of chickens that most cities allow in residential areas. 5 is also a common one. There might be a couple that are 3, but It's just a number that was chosen.
Okay.
No magic about it.
Yeah, and I only ask because the ordinance in town surrounding dogs is a maximum of 3. So I see this potentially becoming a ethical slippery slope of we're allowing more of one animal, less of another. I also, I'm not for it. I see this being, to Mr. Jones's point in his testimony, hard to enforce. There's a lot of, minute details here. Also, the 5-year renewal, going back to the dogs, we have a biannual renewal in town for dog licenses or a lifetime license. And I actually see the inverse with the fees. I guess to speak openly, if you don't have $100 to pay for a permit, what are you doing purchasing animals that you need to provide for, maintain? You need electricity, you need, to heat water in the winter. I have family that has chickens out in the country, south of town, and it's a lot of work. It's every day you're tending to them. So, it to me, enforcing it would be, I think, a lot. Much like Mr. Jones said, it's subjective with odor and noise and whatnot, just like dogs are, I'm not speaking completely against that, but I think we open ourselves up to potential problems, so that's all I've got.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boris.
Justin, I just want to piggyback on that a little bit, so entertain us. What does enforcement look like in this scenario where there's annoyance or, whether it's a dog or a chicken or whatever, what does the city do in that situation? How do you enforce something like that?
Well, the same way we do for all of our ordinances. We work on complaints. If we have complaints, especially if we've got a license, it's easy because we can just look at the license and just give them a phone call and talk to them. Otherwise, we've got a code enforcement officer that goes around town inspecting properties. And if we get a complaint about a shed or a fence, we can ask them to take a picture when they go by someplace or look at it. Certainly, we go out if we get complaints and look at anything, no matter what it's regarding.
And then, so would there be steps to a license removal if it was needed? Is there a formal process that we'd have to have for that if, there's numerous complaints and, I don't know,
Yeah,
chickens running free, whatever?
I can only speak to other issues that we have. If we get a complaint, we talk to the property owner and give them a certain amount of time to address the issue. And if they don't have it addressed by that time, if it's related to a license, then we can send it to the city council for revocation. If it's not a license, it's more difficult, but we can, issue a summons to appear in court or a fine.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
I have a comment. My understanding with complaints is that the police are involved before the city ever hears about anything. So they evidently want to hear the complaint and then it comes to the city. Is that correct?
Well, if somebody calls 911, but generally for zoning and maintenance issues, they call the city. They call it code
Okay.
enforcement or planning department.
Okay, so like noise dogs, parties,
That kind of stuff is usually called to the police department.
police department, okay.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
Well, I can't help but comment on this because this is, I'm a residential real estate agent. I've had multiple people that have lived in the city of Hastings that have moved because they can't have chickens. It's real. And they know exactly what cities in the Twin City area. I mean, I knew that list years ago because so many people only want to move where they can have chickens. And I feel like of all tiers, all 7-county metro area, Hastings is by far the most rural, like by far, in the eyes of the Twin City area and in my opinion, the eyes of the people that live here. And I feel like we would be the most logical community to allow things like this than any other community that's more urban. But I just felt the need to say that because, I mean, most real estate agents realize that you look on the city website for ordinance, you don't have to call. So I would suspect either they were citizens, or citizens that live in the city or agents that are from outside the city that didn't take the time to look themselves. But, I mean, it's a very predominant talk in the real estate industry. I mean, everybody in my office in Apple Valley knows what cities in the Twin City area have chickens because there's so many people that want to live there. It's just with the food and the people not having money for food, it's like a garden in your yard. It's providing food for your family, and I think it's only going more that way. The people that don't feel the need or understand the need are people that have never needed food on a daily basis and nutritious food. I mean, it's expensive to buy organic food at the grocery stores, but if you can provide it yourself out of your own yard that you bought and have access to, that's a beautiful thing. That's the American way, in my opinion. Because people want to be able to provide for their family and for themselves, and they want to be able to have healthy food and not just cheap food that has no nutritional value. And I think they can control that on their own property that they purchased, just like a garden. But what was that? Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, but I have some concern on that as well. I mean, if people are going to go into this for food because they don't have the money, then how are they going to get established to care for these chickens? I mean, they gotta have a coop, they gotta have fencing, they gotta have all of these things. And if they can't afford food, how are they gonna afford those? And the chicken food. My concern is then they may start cutting corners and not doing things that they need to do to do this right.
Sure.
So I see it the other side too.
Yeah, I think there's both, as far as people that, I think that you can accommodate and come up with a structure that's within code for a relatively small amount of money. And then it's long-term. I mean, you're providing food for your family 365 days a year. It's not, I mean, I know they slow down in the winter, but really they're providing food for their family all year round for however long they live at that house. So it's not just a one-time fee, it's somebody evaluating on the long term. And people, if they can stay somewhere on the long term, then they don't have to move. They don't have to go places to be able to, and if they could move out in the country and afford to move out in the country, the chances are pretty good they can afford organic. And they can afford out in the country. I mean, it's not, it's very expensive to live out in the country. And that isn't the people that need, the people that need food live in the city.
Commissioners, any other comments? If not,
I got one more. I see the points you've made, and I don't want certainly the tenor of my comments to come off as crass or shutting out people that can't afford food. I fully understand that's an issue. We need to be cognitive of the best interests of the city proper. The city of Hastings already allows chickens go south of 160th Street. There's townships that your kids attend Hastings schools. You live in Hastings, but you're allowed to have chickens, goats, whatever you want. I just see this being a slippery slope into other things, and I'm okay with Hastings being a little different. We always have been since I've been here for 32 years, and I think that's a draw for people. Just because Lakeville and Farmington and Rosemount are doing it doesn't mean we need to do it, so.
part of my concern is just the age of Hastings. We have a lot of very small lots. The original was prohibited on properties less than an acre, and I understand why they did that, was to make sure that it didn't become a nuisance to the neighbors. As soon as we start looking at very small lots and you get into some parts of Hastings, which you may not have so many of in some of these other communities, Lakeville, Farmington, that are much newer than Hastings. I think you could get some real issues when you have neighbors that are that close to each other.
When I think of close neighbors, I think of Minneapolis. I think of St. Paul. Those lots, you don't get those small, there's barely those small lots. They don't, almost every lot in those cities is smaller than most lots here. And they don't have complaints, and they're able to feed their people. And Hastings has got a severe, I tried to get Hastings Family Service here to give you guys the stats on how starving our community is. It's real. There are starving families here every day of the week. And I just don't think people realize how prevalent food need is in the city of Hastings.
Commissioners, any other questions? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Martin,
I'd like to make a motion to deny ordinance amendment 2019-09, 15507, 2224, and .36.
Commissioners, we have a motion on the table to deny this, so a yea vote would be to deny. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Any other comments? If not, we have a motion on the to deny the change. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those to deny?
Nay.
The motion fails. We can still,
Right, we can accept other
we can take another motion if somebody wants to, a motion to accept it.
I'd like to make a motion to accept and exclude the 25-foot setback. And then let me look to see if that's it.
Exclude it or change it?
To exclude it. Because we've already got the setbacks for outbuildings. And it would be it would be an outbuilding. And then I think that the fee to also, reduce the fee to more, I just think it's a little bit high. But I understand the mailing or whatever. What are we at with the mailing on this? Is it 200 feet, did you say?
That's correct. It's currently proposed as
200.
200 feet. Also, with this ordinance amendment, we don't change fees. That's a separate process, but,
Oh, okay.
but we can certainly take any comments you have for when that is brought forward.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve as it stands and excluding the 25-foot setback from homes on adjoining lots.
So we have a motion to accept with the one exclusion. Do we have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
We have a second. Any further comments?
If I could, Justin, can you just clarify, okay, so accessory buildings are already a 5-foot setback
Accessory buildings have a 5-foot setback from the property line.
from the
Correct.
property line, and then your neighbor would be another 7 for their setback, typically?
Yeah, well, the accessory building would usually be behind the house,
Right,
and so,
so you're not really gonna be.
yeah, it'd be like a kitty corner type situation.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing, yes.
Yes. So we'd be approving this code as we have here. We're striking 3C, the setback. And then, I know you talked about this, but so the chickens per acre, and are we clear on the language? Do we need to be clear on the language?
Yeah, staff's intention was to have it read 4 per parcel up to an acre, and
Okay.
additional 4 per acre after that.
After that, okay. And so that's clarified.
Yeah.
So no thoughts on sizing enclosures, or do we want to go down that path, or is that,
What about the enclosure?
as far as sizing the coops, if you're gonna have 4 chickens, should you put them in a square foot, or is there nothing restricting anyone from a minimum size? And again, this is kind of that can of worms we're talking about, it starts to open up already.
Right.
But,
Well, they have to have space to roost. So there's not a whole lot of space it takes to roost.
we can leave it, go ahead.
If I could just add a comment, we do have some aspects of the ordinance that do talk about animal cruelty. I think if we were afraid that people would maybe take, a too conservative look at that, staff could look at to see if there's any general minimums that are recommended by some association and bring those up at the city council meeting. But as far as the initial approval, where we look at what their proposal is, we definitely would look for a situation where they were trying to have a gross violation of an animal's movements.
Maybe if the city just had some guidelines. Right,
Okay.
sure, right.
Okay, we have a motion on the table, seconded. Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, guys. So this will go before the city council for a first reading on May 6th. That would be on the consent agenda with the public hearing scheduled for May 20th.
Thank you. The next agenda on the item, next item on the agenda is the public hearing for the draft comprehensive plan. Justin.
Thank you, Commissioners. The comprehensive plan has been worked on for some time now, and this is one of the final steps in the process. It's to hold a public hearing and take any public comments before the city would send this to the Metropolitan Council for review. I would ask that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and also make a recommendation to City Council to consider sending it to the Met Council for that review. After the Met Council reviews it and provides comments, the City Council can adopt the plan. I believe the Met Council has quite a bit of time to review it, like maybe around 6 months or so. Some background information is that this 2040 comprehensive plan is an update of our 2030 comprehensive plan that was created in about 2008. This time we looked at extensive community outreach to determine the direction that the community wanted to go in the future and priorities that the community might have. We also had a 19-member steering committee of citizens that volunteered, along with the chairs, that included the chairs of the advisory commissions in the city. And the Planning Commission reviewed the draft plan on June 25th of last year and recommended approval to the City Council along with the other commissions. Some of the outreach that we did during this process was we held an interactive booth at Rivertown Days. We had a project website, a listserv for communication. We did a community survey and a mapping input program. We had press releases, studio interviews with Hastings Community Television, public workshop. We had newsletters mailed to all residents, along with the city's normal newsletter items. We had a joint City Council and Planning Commission SWOT analysis. We had a lot of activity on social media. There was a lot of stories in the news section of our website. We had an open-ended student survey for youth participation. We had hard copies of the community survey that we delivered to the senior center and area churches. We held key stakeholder interviews that were held over 2 days with 30 individuals in 4-hour-long focus groups. We had flyers. We had updates and interviews with KDWA radio station. We held a pop-up meeting at the Spiral Brewery during the holiday hoopla downtown. We had monthly steering committees. And we've had public input from the draft plan. And we had an open house, and we streamed live on Facebook and replayed on Hastings Community Television. At the end of the process, we've sent the draft plan to the affected jurisdictions and provided a 6-month review window for that draft plan. That would include neighboring municipalities along with state agencies. Nininger Township commented that they don't want the city to annex any of their land into the city, as it is prime ag land. I guess maybe a response to that would be that the city does have growth pressure, not only from people wanting to move here and people expand here, but also the Metropolitan Council has growth requirements for the city of Hastings. And due to physical constraints, the city can only expand to the west and to the south. And also the city does not look at annexing land outside of our boundaries. We only react to requests from landowners outside of town for annexation and provide them with an answer. Other townships and Cottage Grove commented acceptance of the plan. Washington County, the DNR, National Park Service, and Dakota County had some good comments that we've incorporated into the plan, which can be found in the memo from the consultant in the staff report. Also in the draft plan, those changes are highlighted on the project website. And these are just some photographs of the process along the way. And with that, we can hold a public hearing, and staff can also answer questions that you may have.
Thank you, Justin. Well, we'll open the public hearing. If anybody would like to come up to the podium, give your name and address. Anybody?
My name is Frank Knoll, part owner of Magic Touch Car Wash. How does this plan now work with the Vermillion corridor plan? Is this gonna, does this form in with them, or does it, has any difference in it?
No, they kind of started about at the same time, and the comprehensive plan is kind of a 30,000-foot view, real general.
I
and
know,
that-
I've been to Rosebud, but
Sure. And that corridor study was much more specific to the corridor, and the comprehensive plan references the corridor plan for things along that
in
corridor.
other words, you're taking in more of the city than just the corridor.
Correct.
And you're trying to get into Annex, Villager.
Oh, well, no, on the plan, it shows some of the areas that we anticipate will be growing. And we anticipate that areas adjacent to Nininger would grow, because that's what they've done in the past.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments or questions? I think I might make a motion. We can certainly continue the discussion, but I'd like to make a motion to recommend this to the city council to consider sending this to the Metropolitan Council for review. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second. Any further comments? If not, then I will, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried.
And this will also be going before the city council for consideration on May 20th.
Thank you.
May 20th? Is that what you said?
Yep.
May 20, okay, thank you.
Other business?
Other business, well, I can provide some updates. The last city council meeting on April 15th, we had a few items that went forward from the April 8th meeting, including the actions with the McNamara Field that was approved, and that project is moving forward there. Looking at our schedule, we've got our next meeting scheduled on May 13th. At that time, I don't know if we have anything, applications pending at this point, so we'll keep you in touch with what goes on with that. We do have a vacancy on the planning commission, as you know. We had applications due on April 15th. We have 5 individuals that are interesting, and we'll be conducting interviews, I think, May 7th. So the intent on that is to have something before the city council for appointment on May 20th, and then that person could start at the last meeting in May on the planning commission. So that's what we have.
Thank you, John. Anybody else got any other questions or comments? With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
We are adjourned.